In the frozen wasteland, where time seemed to stand still, Jack found tracks that could lead either to salvation or doom. But the choice wasn't his alone. The northern wind carried short, piercing cries across the icy expanse, nearly impossible to hear as they drowned in the howling blizzard and swirling snowdrifts. The sky seemed oppressively low, and the snow creaked louder than ever, while a growing sense of foreboding filled the air. It seemed like a simple, cold morning, but Jack's heart was pounding harder than on days of particularly dangerous patrols. He thought it would be just another day at the edge of the world, among the white snowdrifts and eternal frost. But he was wrong. This day would mark the beginning of an extraordinary story in his life about sacrifice, unwavering courage, and how a wild polar bear once remembered a human and repaid him in kind. Jack, the lead ranger of the local reserve, was following a sound that grew louder, as if someone was calling for help. Through the snow curtain, he discerned the outline of a natural ice bridge over a partially frozen river. Approaching, he noticed a deep hole cut into the ice sheet. Inside lay a cold-stricken polar bear cub. Its fur was covered in frost, and its eyes were half closed. In the pale sunlight, signs of human interference became visible: smooth, almost vertical walls of the pit, tool marks. Everything indicated this was a trap, skillfully set by poachers. The ice had thinned, and the edges were slick and slippery. Jack noticed a few drops of blood on the ice. Apparently, the cub had injured itself trying unsuccessfully to escape from the cold trap. The severe frost was increasingly immobilizing its movements. Nearby, the mother bear was caught in a steel net, a strong cable constricting her paw. Each time she struggled, the cable bit deeper. It seemed the beast had exhausted all attempts to free itself and lay helplessly, watching as her cub struggled for life, unable to come to its aid. Jack felt his heart clench in his chest. Checking the thermometer on his watch, he saw the temperature had dropped below normal and the wind was gathering strength, covering everything around with biting snow. It was clear that action was needed quickly, or the cub would not survive another hour. Determined to rescue the cub first, Jack frantically rummaged through his backpack, pulling out climbing gear, sturdy rope, carabiners, pulleys for a makeshift hoist. His fingers were already numbing despite the heated gloves. He secured one end of the rope, then carefully tied a loop and attempted to throw it into the pit to catch the cub. The first attempt slid off the smooth fur, the second missed entirely. The cub barely resisted, but also didn't assist, too weakened from the cold. Suddenly, Jack heard the distant roar of engines and, peering through the snowy veil, realized snowmobiles were revving somewhere far off. He braced himself, made a third throw, and this time the loop securely caught around the cub's body. Jack began carefully pulling the rope, ensuring the weak little creature wouldn't be cut on sharp ice edges. The quiet whine of snowmobiles grew louder and closer. Only when the cub was nearly at the rim was Jack able to haul it to safety. The cub was utterly weak, breathing in gasps, its small body shivering from the cold. However, besides minor cuts, it appeared uninjured. The ranger wrapped it in a special thermal blanket and gently started to rub its paws to warm it up. The cub didn't resist. In its half-closed eyes, Jack saw exhaustion and resignation, but also a glimmer of trust. The little one was relatively safe. Now it was time to help the mother bear. Approaching where she was trapped, Jack observed a complicated lock on the cable. It seemed like a professional setup, difficult to breach with ordinary tools. Taking out his multi-tool, Jack realized he'd need to act with utmost caution. The cable could injure the bear's paw further if jerked too suddenly. She was a massive and dangerous predator, yet seemed to understand the man meant her no harm. The bear didn't growl or snap. Her dark eyes watched as Jack, gritting his teeth, worked at the lock's mechanism. Meanwhile, the roar of snowmobiles became distinctly audible. The poachers' voices cut through, sounding none too friendly. The cold was intensifying Jack's trembling fingers. but he continued to focus intently, removing one lock, then another. Then, with a metallic clank and the crunch of snow, 3 armed men emerged from the snow veil. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a noticeable grey beard, was the first to see the trap was empty, save for the ranger and the bear herself. Rage twisted his face. One of his partners rushed at the bear, but Jack instinctively shielded himself with her enormous body, trying to remain hidden while continuing to work on the lock. He felt the intricate mechanism. It was just moments before the chain would be undone. "Hey, someone's there!" shouted one of the poachers, aiming his rifle. Jack felt adrenaline flood his body. He turned his tool carefully, striving not to damage the sensitive mechanism of the lock. Just a little more. At that moment, the snowstorm struck with renewed force, whisking up a cloud of stinging flakes and momentarily blinding the poachers. Jack heard the telltale click. The lock had given way, and the chain fell clattering to the ice. The bear sensed her freedom. She rose, transforming into a gigantic white mass with eyes burning with icy fury. The poachers stood frozen for an instant. Jack seized the distraction to retreat into the storm, huddling behind the nearest drift. A roar cut through the winds howling and the snowmobiles revving. The men scattered, shouting in terror. From his refuge, Jack watched the powerful creature defend her offspring. Assured the bear had driven the trespassers away, the ranger dashed to where he had hidden the cub. As he had expected, the mother bear quickly found her cub by scent. Scooping it with one powerful paw, she pulled it close and disappeared into the snowy mist, heading further into the sanctuary's protected areas to safer ground. For the next 2 months, Jack's life became a tense, nearly endless cycle of nightly watches. He understood that the poachers wouldn't forgive the spoiled capture. Periodically, he found fresh snowmobile tracks, bottles, and cigarette butts in isolated parts of the reserve, as if someone were deliberately tracking his routes. The oppressive feeling of being followed intensified whenever temperatures dropped to extremes. On such days, the snow didn't just crunch underfoot, it creaked ominously, and a tension hung in the air, like before a storm. Jack tried to be as cautious as possible, but deep down, he knew a confrontation was inevitable. And then, on one particularly bitter day, when the sky was drawn tight with leaden clouds, he noticed fresh tracks in the snow. Recently, someone had clearly rested there. Cigarette packs littered the ground, left conspicuously in plain sight. He documented this with his camera, needing evidence for the report. Suddenly, an explosion tore through the air. Jack instinctively ducked, his heart racing, but listening, he realized it wasn't a real gunshot, but a blank warning. From the brush of winter cedar, where the snow sparkled, mocking voices rang out. Jack understood they were deliberately terrifying him, driving him like a wild animal into a trap. He dashed for the trunk of a snow-covered larch, but it was too late. No sooner had he hidden than 4 armed men in camouflage emerged from the flanks. Their faces were grim, frozen, yet determined. Among them, he recognized the broad-shouldered, grey-bearded man, presumably the leader. "Playing hero again, huh?" the man sneered, eyes narrowed. Jack attempted to grab his radio, hanging at his belt, to alert his colleagues, but a harsh strike to his head drained his strength. He fell into the snow, barely processing, the rough hands flipping him onto his back, binding his wrists with coarse rope biting into his skin. The poachers, acting in unison and confidence, began raiding his backpack. Tools, the first aid kit, the camera, everything was tossed aside into the snow. The radio was thrown into a deep drift, vanishing without a trace. His phone was also discarded somewhere into the white void. The leader unrolled an old crumpled map, judging by its appearance, heavily used in these parts. He stabbed a finger into a spot and intoned, "Over there." The poachers shoved Jack forward, forcing him to march. Resistance seemed pointless. They trudged through the snowy plain as the wind howled increasingly overhead. The minutes dragged agonizingly on for possibly an hour, maybe more. The frost seized every breath, the air crystallizing around him. The area grew more desolate, and the chance of encountering other rangers or casual travelers was nil. On the edges of Jack's consciousness flitted the chilling thought that he might not make it out. These men knew where they were going. They knew how to hide, how to obscure tracks, and how to vanish into the snowy wilderness. They were calm, unrushed, a terrifying thought, because those who spare you are usually nervous. Suddenly, one of the poachers at the lead abruptly stopped. "Quiet," he hissed. They all halted. Even the wind seemed to pause for an instant. In the ensuing silence, full of frost and the dull thrum of blood in their ears, came a deep, resonant growl, ancient, booming, as if the very ice beneath them groaned with sound. Emerging from the snow haze, as if from another world, came a white, colossal, shadow-silent figure. No crunch, no click, just the snow dusting her coat and fog, gently drifting from her nostrils like the rhythm of a mountain's breath. Jack recognized her immediately. The scar on her front paw was the same crescent cut into his memory from that day by the pit. She moved with a confidence that needed no threat. She simply emerged, and everything shifted. "Don't fire," rasped the grey-bearded leader, almost disbelief tinging his voice. His hand crawled slowly toward his gun, yet his fingers refused to obey. The bear placed herself between them, massive as a snow boulder, with a gaze nearly human in its intensity. No fear, no rage, just resolve. "Don't touch him." The poachers froze. Someone stepped back, another gulped audibly, teeth chattering. "If we shoot, she'll charge. We won't make it," one of them whispered. The bear growled deeper, her ears flattened, paws splaying in a hunter's crouch, poised to spring. None of them dared move. The culmination of the world's tension was centered here. Then a single man faltered. His hand twitched toward his rifle. He hesitated. The bear's roar that rolled across the tundra was no longer a warning. It was a sentence. Together with her, it felt like the Arctic itself roared. She took just one step forward, and it was enough. "Run!" the leader barked, retreating. The rest scattered, fleeing like children pursued by a nightmare. The bear didn't pursue them. She simply stood, immovable and infinite as the winter itself, watching them go, listening until assured the threat was gone. Jack lay in the snow, unable to trust what his eyes and senses told him. She stood as a guardian between him and the abyss, more than predator, a protector. When the poachers' shouts vanished entirely and the tundra was left with only the wind's howl whipping from icy ridges, the bear slowly turned her head. Her gaze fell upon Jack. He lay bound in the snow, face dusted with rime, breathing fitful, heart hammering so fiercely it seemed it would echo through the storm. Immobilized, not by the ropes, but by the profound awareness that before him stood more than a beast. Before him was power, nature, destiny. She approached without hurry, without menace, bridging with every step the chasm between man and beast. Jack remained still, not from fear, but from awe. The enormous bear muzzle loomed close. In her eyes, no rage or savagery, only intelligence, a silent but deeply unsettling understanding. Lowering her head with utmost care, almost glass-delicate, her nose touched his bound wrists, pausing, acknowledging. Then her jaws, capable of crushing bone, gingerly enclosed the knot. No haste, no jerk, only deliberate motion. Jack held his breath. The situation was implausible, dreamlike. Click. One loop of the rope snapped. Click, another. A third click, and all at once his hands were unbound. Blood surged back into his fingers, his wrists burnt, yet he felt not pain, but a strange, near-sacred relief. Slowly he rose, meeting her gaze from below. The bear stood a mere pace away, could have left but didn't, as if waiting, as if testing. "Will you rise alone? Will you cope?" "Thank you," he murmured softly, nearly inaudible, but packed within that word lay all, the fear, the respect, and the ineffable connection. In that moment, she inclined her head just slightly, almost a human-like gesture, neither a signal nor a gesture, but an acknowledgement. Between them lay something beyond an encounter, beyond obligation, a bond, pure and silent, yet real. After a few moments of silent watching, she turned sharply and moved away, dissolving into the snowy expanse. Only her massive footprints in the snow and the strong scent of her presence remained to mark that something extraordinary had occurred. Jack knelt in the snow, overwhelmed by feelings. Eventually, he knew he had to care for himself. Unable to remain in such cold without communication or transport, he felt through the snowdrift for his radio, only to find it dead and frost-laden. He gathered scattered belongings to make for the nearest post. After securing basic dressings for his abrasions, he set off slowly, leaving a clear track on the still untouched snow, his soul a strange balance of fear and admiration. Had anyone ever told him a wild polar bear, one of the Arctic's most dangerous predators, would save him, sever his ropes with care, he'd have never believed. But now he was a living testament to that tale. Jack survived. He reached the post, frozen, exhausted, wrists rubbed raw by the ropes. He sat silently by the stove for a long time, unable to speak. Colleagues fussed around, offering hot drinks and rubbing his hands. Awkwardly, he recounted some of it, about the poachers, the trap, the confrontation with the bear. A hush fell. Faces grew solemn. Someone nodded, another chipped in quietly. An elderly ranger said, "She remembered." That happens, rarely, but it does. Later, Jack filed an official report, dry, precise, free of anything mystical. Just the facts: poachers, coordinated efforts, precise traps. He added one line: the animal, presumably previously saved, exhibited targeted defensive behavior towards the human, showed no aggression. He signed, submitted, closed the laptop, and sat for a long while, gazing out the window where a light blizzard circled the whitened world. Weeks passed. Rumors about the event spread through the region. Even the bravest hunters avoided that section of the reserve. There was talk of a spirit in white fur, silently tracking, unforgiving. Jack made no comments. Only sometimes, walking down a snowy path, he'd spot in the distance a lone, massive track or catch a glance from the bushes. Calm and dark, a glance unmistakably wild. In such moments he'd pause, gaze back, whisper quietly, "All's well, I remember." Then turn and move forward without fear or doubt, knowing that where a bond was once born between a human and a beast, it could no longer be broken, even in a world frozen under eternal snow. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.